this really important discussion on scoliosis services and the wider need for accountability within our healthcare system. First and foremost, I must acknowledge the frustration, anger, distress experienced by children and families waiting far too long for spinal surgery. Every child deserves timely care when it is needed. While additional investment, increased theatre capacity, outsourcing of procedures have really helped to reduce those waiting times, we must be honest, more needs to be done. But it is really clear, Minister, from every action that you have taken since you've taken up your portfolio, that you are committed to that. Families navigating these services deserve not only treatment but clear communication, transparency and respect. Those are the basic standards people should be able to expect from any healthcare system. The proposed statutory inquiry into spina bifida and complex scoliosis services will therefore be an essential step to understanding what went wrong and ensuring it never happens again. It must be thorough, independent and centred on the experiences of patients and families. However, I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the significant development this week regarding the victims and survivors of Michael Shine. Being from Louth, this is really personal. Michael Shine was a disgusting and despicable paedophile who preyed on hundreds of these young men over decades, using his place of authority and perceived respectability to hide the abuse and to continue the apparent abuse. It was known around Louth. It was known that he was an abuser. As a child, I knew he was bad, but I was never old enough or articulate enough to understand what that bad meant. It was an open secret, an open shame, that authorities kept it a secret and kept it slammed down. The courage of the victims, many of whom have spent years seeking the truth and accountability, cannot be overestimated. I have had the privilege of meeting some of those brave men. Their stories will never leave me. They spoke with desperate honesty, with vulnerability about the trauma they carried for decades. They spoke about years of silence, about the doors that should have been opened to them but instead were slammed shut. Instead of being listened to and supported to, far too many of them were treated deplorably. A moment from those meetings that have stayed with me, and I go back to it when I think about these horrors. It was a photograph of one of the victims as a young boy, a beautiful wee boy. And when I looked at that photo, I saw my own boys. And my gut instinct was to reach out and to hug him, to scream for him, that no one was able to protect him, to protect that wee child and hundreds of other wee children that had a desperate experience of having Michael Shine as their doctor. But when I looked at the wee eyes of that wee boy, I imagined the horror that he must have been living through at that moment. And when I looked at the man that he grew into, I saw that hurt that was still there and the trauma that he carried with him in those wee eyes that brought him to my office that day. But I also saw an incredible honesty, a decency and an extraordinary strength. I want to thank and congratulate Dignity for Patients on their incredible work, the victims who have come forward and have given up so much to get to this point. I want to thank you, Minister, for your openness to get this done. Thank the Taoiseach for meeting with us and the victims a few months back. That meeting made a deep and lasting effect on all who were in that office that day. The confirmation of the independent facilitator to begin the scoping exercise for the statutory inquiry is really welcome, and I spoke to Dignity for Patients today. They are enthusiastic about this, they are anxious about this, and they are really positive about it. The survivors themselves, they have said for the first time in many years, they feel genuinely positive that progress is being made. It's absolutely essential that any inquiry arising from this process is victim-centred, trauma-informed and grounded in a human rights-based approach. Survivors must not simply be participants in the process, their voices must shape it. And Minister, I know you're thoroughly committed to that. One issue I want to raise is the timeline for the scoping exercise, which is currently set as 16 weeks. We absolutely agree that progress needs to be made swiftly, but must also ensure that it's not rushed. It's incredibly ambitious and it's a great timeline, but if additional time or resources are required to properly engage with survivors and to develop those robust terms of reference, then Minister, I ask that it would be granted. After decades of waiting, the victims deserve a process that is thorough, respectful, capable and delivering that truth. When I look at the photo of that wee boy, I can think that we did justice for him in 2026.